Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Mandy Haberkamp. I am the Director of Demand Gen here at Greenshades, and I will be your moderator today. But now let's talk to our presenters and let them introduce themselves. Panelists, let's give you, if you wouldn't mind, maybe take a minute or two, tell us who you are, a little bit about yourself and your company. Scott, let's kick it off with you.
Well, thanks everybody for joining. Scott Loudermilk. I have probably closer to 20, but over 15 years of payroll HCM experience. So I've done everything from direct sales to partner sales. So have quite a bit of experience on how the whole process works, and a little bit on Greenshades. Greenshades software is a leading provider of payroll and HR solutions designed to automate and simplify your business with deep commitment to helping organizations manage their workforce efficiency. We offer a comprehensive suite to help automate your payroll processing, your HR needs, such as employee self-service, onboarding, benefit admin, and of course your tax and compliance. We have a user-friendly solutions that tailor to meet your unique needs and offer a seamless integrations with your ERP and other critical business systems you have. Greenshades solution is backed by our one-on-one personalized support, 20 plus years of experience in the industry, and with over 4,000 clients and growing. Greenshades can really help you transform your payroll, tax, and HR challenges and make it an easier, simpler solution for yourself. Again, thanks for joining, everyone.
Josh.
I am Josh Jones, and I am the manager of talent acquisition at Employ. And if you're not familiar with Employ, Employ is made up of several companies that have kind of come together that are all focused around recruiting and talent acquisition. We have Jazz HR, Lever, JobBite, and the next thing, RPO, that can provide a number of services. A little bit about my background. I've been in the TA space for over a decade now. I've worked in agency recruiting, executive search, and then a few stops in corporate recruiting. So happy to be here with you all today.
Thank you. And last but certainly not least, Gurmeet.
Thanks, Mandy. Nice to meet you, Scott and Josh. A bit of my background. I'm a serial entrepreneur. Started with an IT services company. Around 2000, started Selex. I'm the CEO at Selex. I have about 30 years of experience focused in the human capital management space with a specific focus in the area of advanced employee scheduling. This means that if you need anything beyond basic scheduling tools, Selex can help. Our mission at Selex is to help our customers schedule thousands of employees in minutes. I live in beautiful Vancouver, a little bit smoky here today, but it's getting clear with all the forest fires. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to chat further. Finally, a fun fact, I actually work from the office, which is, I guess, a novelty nowadays.
It is a bit, isn't it? Thanks so much. All right, so I know we've got a bit to talk about, so let's just jump right in. Before we kind of start chatting, I just want to kind of level set us why we're here again today. So we know that in the world today, businesses are reflecting on automation, right? With everything going on, automation has become a key strategy for many businesses to improve their efficiencies, to be able to tackle everything that's thrown at them. So we want to just take a little bit of time today to discuss all the challenges that we know come with the decision to automate. What are stakeholders and businesses facing when they're looking at these automation solutions? And then we'd like to leave you with just a few tips and kind of best practices on ways that you can overcome them so that you can reap those rewards. So again, jumping right in, automation, right? It's not new. It plays a critical role in our everyday lives, everything from smart devices to automatic bill pay. Automation is everywhere. So for businesses, it can really help to save that time, reduce that stress, and increase the efficiencies. Do you, panelists, do you have anything to kind of add to this? Again, just kind of automation where we are today, right? So it's interesting topic. I think it's a very relevant topic that obviously we've got a great audience here that's ready to listen to.
Yeah, Mandy, if I can, I think we don't think of automation this way, but automation, I think, can offer us a competitive advantage. So a lack of automation really puts a business at a disadvantage. So just think about what I said. Without automation, you will be at a disadvantage versus your competition. With automation, you'll have the upper hand. So automation is really a necessity, not an option, in order to remain competitive and relevant, I think.
Absolutely.
Good point. Yeah.
All right. So let's kick off the conversation with our first question. So it's not new. It's been around a while. It's here to stay. Is there anything that you are excited about or that you believe businesses should be? Scott, or I'm sorry, Josh, let's actually kick it over to you. Anything that you're excited about with automation today?
Yeah, for sure. You know, as we kind of talked about, I think with regards to talent acquisition specifically, I think automation has been kind of creeping its way into the tools over the years at kind of a slower rate, but something that really, really excites me, and it's, you know, a big buzzword in any kind of discussion these days, is AI. And we're already starting to see some of that in even the products that we have and offer to the market. But I think there's, you know, a lot that AI is going to bring to specifically the talent acquisition technology landscape. And like I said, we've already started to see, you know, some of that in some of our products. We've got some products that help, you know, with bias. We've got some products. We've got a sourcing tool that can use AI to go out and search your database and, you know, automatically reach out to past applicants for you. It's on our enterprise solution, but it's called zero-click intelligent sourcing. So those kinds of advances that really, you know, streamline things for the recruiting team are really what make me the most excited.
Yeah, AI is a big buzz right now too. I think Gurmeet, don't you have a bit to say about AI as well?
Well, it's an area that I'm definitely excited about. We've incorporated AI into our solutions as well. So I think AI is something, you know, we've heard of AI, we've heard the term artificial intelligence, we've heard the term machine learning. All these essentially mean the same thing, right? So a little bit about in terms of what is AI. AI is really understanding data patterns in large volume of data, or what is commonly referred to as big data, right? There's actually lots of applications for AI, and we've all experienced some of this that touches our daily lives. You know, we've seen, for example, if you get in your car, it's going to tell you how long it's going to take to get home, for example, without you asking. You've been presented an ad, I'm sure, in the browser where you're searching for something, and all of a sudden an ad pops up in the browser. All these involve some form of AI. At Selex, we use the AI to figure out data patterns in the data we collect in order to help the users make better decisions and easier choices. Sort of, maybe let's take a situation where a scheduler has the option to select from multiple employees to work a shift, who passes all the automated checks. Which employee does the schedule select if they got multiple options? That's a pretty hard thing to do.
Interesting.
The
Selex
AI, for example, in this case, you know, it can say, okay, Joe versus Fred, and looks at the underlying data and picks the option in terms of, let's say Fred is likely to show up on time. That's the person that's going to be put into the shift. That's really hard for the human to really determine. So that's really the advantage of AI, and AI should make life easier. That's really a key benefit from an automation perspective, I think.
Yeah, super interesting. Like you both brought up, I think that is kind of the new and exciting thing, right? So it's interesting to see how businesses are starting to incorporate AI into their solutions and into their processes. That's great. So what else, right? So we know it's not new. We know there's a lot of exciting things like AI and other automations that are happening today that are on the horizon. But why are we here today? Like, what is especially important about automation for businesses now? I'd love to dive into that a little bit. Maybe Scott, maybe we can start off with you as well too. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in this day and age, between the generations that everything is automated, I mean, like Ramit said, it gives you an advantage, and it gives you an advantage on hiring the right people. If you have to present yourself as a modern, modern forward-thinking company, and that comes to how you apply for your job, how you get onboarded, and coming back to like where Greenshades is in the payroll side, you bring all the information in. All this process, automating it makes it more of a review process than the hard work, the grunt work that you used to have to do. So I think it makes your company look better. It allows you to hire better people. Allows you to find better people, from like talking what Josh says, looking for the right people. And it makes their life easier through scheduling, through, online access to their check stubs, to any of these things they need. And it takes out, one, the human making an error. Two, it takes away some of the confrontation as, oh, you don't like me, you didn't give me that schedule, or you didn't do this for me. No, the system does it all for me, and it makes your life easier. That's the whole point of doing this, is to make life easier, make it more efficient.
Yeah, easier inefficiencies. Josh, how about you? Why do you think it's especially important that businesses are having this conversation now?
Yeah, right now, I mean, we see it on the screen, right? It's, the labor market's very tight, and it's been that way for a number of years now. You see some of the numbers up there around just kind of the shortage in labor, and that's only going to continue to grow over the next several years. So, there are way more jobs out there than there are people to fill them right now. So that creates, kind of a combustible situation in talent acquisition and recruiting, right? So oftentimes speed is the name of the game in recruiting, even now, and just some of the automated solutions that we have today. So how can we step those up and enable our teams to work even more efficiently and faster? I think that's it's something needs to give here, and I think AI and automation is the way to do this. I can think of things that oftentimes slow a process down in the interview process, and some of the automations that have helped speed that up, such as like self-scheduling. I can think of things like chat bots that kind of help get some questions answered that's done by AI. So all of those things make that process better. And with the market, the way that it's trending, and the shortage of jobs, as hiring teams, we're always going to be looking for talent. So then next, we just got to figure out how we find that talent faster, and how do we communicate with them more effectively. And that's all going to be done through technology, AI, and automation.
Yeah. And what about you, Gurmeet? I know, in your industry, right, in where Soleix works, similar to Greenshades, there's a lot of regulations. There's a lot of workforce changes as well. What are you hearing of why more and more people are looking into automation solutions such as yours?
Well, I think, Mandy, it's hard to keep the volume of information in your head, right? So if you're trying to make decisions, and this is where automation is about, in terms of making the best decision possible. So you need that information, and you have to have some level of automation. We've sort of thrown the term, definitely. We talked a lot about AI. That's really processing information faster. So if you don't have the automation, you're really trying to make decisions based on limited information. The more automation you have, you're really able to process that information and sort of get to the best decision. If you're looking at things like compliance, which we face, you're in a unionized environment, you got to make sure that there aren't union grievances. You got to be able to have proper auditing and so forth. Say, this is why this was done. That's essential to automation. That's essentially essential in terms of really leveraging automation, I think.
Yeah, and like you said earlier, competition, right? All of these factors are playing into increased competition for more and more businesses. Great, thank you so much. So let's jump from there into the challenges, right? We know automation is helpful. We know it's needed. Why can it be so difficult for businesses to automate? we've kind of narrowed it down to 3 big challenges. The first one is fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of change, often driven by those psychological and practical reasons. But we know that fear is a critical challenge that businesses face. It's rooted in misconceptions, such as lack of control and perceived complexity. But there's so much more as well, too, right? A lot of fears that come in when we think about automations. So, question to the panel again, what are the most common misconceptions that you hear about automation? And Gurmeet, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think the first sort of word or set of words, like it's magic. When it's like it'll solve all my problems. And I think this is where I'd say, look, when you're talking about automation, focus on the key and specific problems to be solved and understand why they need to be solved, right? I think that's important. The other sort of the misconception is that, I'm going to have some automation, I'm going to license some software, then I'm just going to figure it out myself. That often doesn't work. So figuring it out yourself is a mistake, especially I think when you're looking at implementing something that impacts your processes. Do it yourself is not an option. So it's too important not to get it right the first time. And so those are, I think, 2 things that are misconceptions.
Yeah. Scott or Josh?
What I run into is it's the fear of losing your job. The system's going to take away my job, which is so far from the truth. When I was a sales rep, you've got to almost not chuckle and laugh because no, I'm making your job easier. You're automating things. So again, just using from my background, payroll, instead of you doing all this math and you figuring it out and hope you add up the taxes right and the paychecks right and all that stuff, the system's going to do it all for you. Your job is to review the system. Like Gurmeet said, it's not magic, but it is automating it and making your life so much easier, takes away, the fear of messing up your taxes or messing up somebody. The 2 things you don't want to mess up, an employee's paycheck or the taxes, both have horrible repercussions for you. So that the modernizing things just makes life so much easier and more efficient and, makes everybody happier, to be honest with you.
Right. Yeah, you're modernizing, you're helping, right? You're not taking away in many cases. And so I think that's a really valid one too, right? And explaining to the stakeholders and to the end users, right, that it's not about taking jobs, it's about being more efficient. I like that.
Right.
Josh,
I'm sorry.
No, sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, you don't take away their job. We still need those people. You just change it, make it more efficient.
Yeah. Josh, what do you have to add to this? I'm sure you hear a few misconceptions.
Yeah, I think another big one, especially having worked in the SaaS industry for a while now, is just the cost. I think people are always hesitant around the cost of solutions that can really just make our lives easier and better. And I think one way that we can kind of get around that is to really just show the value in what we're purchasing. I know for me personally, it's a little bit more difficult to do. I'm not a revenue generator. I'm probably the biggest spender in our organization in terms of spending money on human capital. So, when I need a new tool, I really have to go put together, what that ROI looks like. And it's easy to do for me because I know, I know my metrics. I know how long like an open sales role can sit open for, and then I can tie that back to how much dollars are we losing out on by having that role open. So I think cost is always kind of a big misconception about automation, but I think there are ways to kind of really drill down into to make sure that it's worth our while to spend the money on the automation. Because if I can hire 3 more salespeople faster to bring in revenue, then it's it's going to pay for itself.
Right.
Yeah,
and that is a big one.
Sorry, if I could add also, because on the slide you had something about the restricted flexibility, that automation restricts flexibility. If I can comment on that.
Yeah.
I think you lose flexibility at an individual level, but you gain scale, right, with automation. And if you can't scale, you can't win.
Yeah.
An example that I think sort of comes to mind for me is an airline example. You used to be able to talk to the agent, request an upgrade. If you were nice to them, you get the upgrade, right? That happened to me. I use that, right? But not
If
anymore.
you're nice to them, sometimes.
Right. Well, that doesn't happen anymore, even if you're nice to them, right? Now the computer will decide who gets the upgrade, and it's usually in the order of loyalty or payment or both. So this,
Right.
at an individual level, as an agent, there's a loss of flexibility. But the net result is greater profit for the airlines and better consistency and transparency, can't even speak anymore, for the airline customers, which I would argue is a better customer experience. And it's a better retention option for the airline as well.
Yeah, that's all good. I think you hit the nail on the head, right? There's a lot of fears and misconceptions. Those are some key ones. Take away of the loss of jobs, the flexibility, the cost. Those are all big ones. So let's jump into our challenge number 2. Once you potentially have addressed the fears and the misconceptions, the second biggest thing that we hear is technology integration, right? Nowadays, businesses are not using one business system, right? There are complicated systems. There are various business systems that they have to take into consideration when they're considering automation. Integration concerns may include, but of course are not limited to, complexities, perhaps with your legacy systems, data migration, trying to figure out how you're going to get all of your data without, sacrificing that data integrity, customizations, and security concerns. So those are just a few. Oh, sorry, I think my screen just jumped. I just have to jump back here a little bit. So carrying on the conversation, how do you suggest the business's plan for those necessary technical integrations? I'm sure all of you have had to give advice on how to approach this. Scott, maybe let's start with you again as well on this.
Okay, I think you've got to do, as the business owner, you've got to do your homework on what you're looking at. Sometimes you'll get this pitch, oh, one system that does it all. Well, at least in my experience, usually that system does one thing very well, and then it has added on these other things that do it okay. I think if you're looking at the right solution for yourself, you've got to find whatever the main solution is, and make sure it works with others. Some companies don't work well or won't work with other companies. Others we have an open API. We'll work with whoever to make your life and your solution best for you. So look for a company that does what you're looking for, but also has partnerships and is willing to work. From our end, if you've got a time and attendance system that you love, and don't want to change that, but you want to change everything else, make sure whoever you're talking to can work with that company. Most softwares can. It's will they is the main thing. So I think that's part of your homework, part of your questions. Do you have open APIs? Are you willing to work with other companies? And if the answer is yes, that puts you that allows you to pick and choose what you need to make your life and your solution the best for you.
Yeah. I like that. Gurmeet, how about you? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, Mandy, I think the one thing to sort of consider is technology integration is actually fairly hard, and customer wants seamless experience, and they should get a seamless experience. So there is sort of the background that has to happen. And what I would say is, work with vendors that are willing to work with your choice of vendors, right? Other vendors. So if you pick one for HR, another, make sure they work together, because I've seen situations where that can be a problem. So I think that's an important consideration. Something that Scott mentioned also about avoiding what I call lock-ins. Avoid that as much as possible, because it's in your best interest to pick the best option to solve your problem, right? And you also, I think, have to understand, why is the integration needed in the first place? We have lots of customers that use our scheduling platform, and they have a different system for time and attendance, and that works well because what we're doing is providing them the planning tools. We're providing the communication tools so people show up and they clock into another system. That's okay. So you have to sort of consider is what integration do you need and why is there a need for it? There has to be good value for the integration, and you have to look at what the benefits and what risk reduction happens as a result of that integration. Final point I'll mention is I think talking to the vendors the integration vendors early on in the process. Don't surprise them by saying, oh, this is the company you have to work with. Let them have the conversations and make sure they understand each other and they can say, yeah, we can work together. That would be a good sign.
Yeah, right. I like that. Talk to them early and make sure you're talking to vendors that play nicely with others. Josh, how about you? What are your thoughts on tech integrations?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll kind of piggyback there, and I would say just, these things need to be thought about early in the process, even as you're selecting your vendor, just to make sure that, the integrations are going to work for you. I think one way to achieve this and for businesses to look at this is kind of looking at the end result and then working your way backwards and figuring out, all right, we're going to need integration here because this system needs to talk to this system. So that's one good approach there is just kind of working your way backwards from there, but just really understanding what integrations you currently have, what you're going to need for that end results or that future outcome, and then just making sure you have a plan in place to tie everything back together.
I like that. I think that we've probably all seen businesses that recognize a need or are looking for a solution, but maybe haven't really thought it through, right? They haven't put that plan together. And then as they go along, then they're realizing, oh my goodness, we needed to integrate here, we needed to integrate there. And that's where you can see some messy situations. So yeah, good points. As we think about our third biggest challenge, adoption, I think the integrations probably play a little bit into the adoption, as of course do the fears and the misconceptions, right? That all culminates into the fear of adoption. You've spent all of this money and all of this time to implement this new automation software, right? And how do you get everybody to use it? How do you make sure that it's used correctly? A couple of things to start by, right? Overcoming that resistance and those apprehensions, those fears, right? So acknowledging that, getting past that to your end users, obviously, as well. And then understanding that results won't be instantaneous. But what else can businesses do? Panel, what have you seen as far as successful adoption? Would love to hear some stories or maybe some advice that you have for our audience here on successful adoption once they've implemented an automation solution. Josh, let's start with you.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen, different solutions that have been adopted wonderfully, and I've seen the opposite side of that. And speaking both internally and externally, I mean, I've seen us implement a solution and have relatively low adoption. I think the one of the most important things you can do to really get the team to adopt would be to really have your leadership team kind of cascade that down. I think that is first and foremost one of the most important things you do when you're implementing anything in an organization, but especially around adopting new technologies, making sure you have that buy-in from the top down, and that tends to create a better environment where other folks will start to adopt it as well. It creates that built-in accountability. It creates that system of support when you see the leaders using it. Outside of that, I think whenever possible, you want to recruit your most supportive stakeholders within the organization, the people who have a really strong voice, and have them send messages in your organization Slack or Teams or whatever channel you're using, and talk about the tool. And then lastly, I would say start small. I think that a lot of times, and it depends, what we're adopting, right, or how big of a technology implementation it is. But we can always add to stuff later. And I think, as to get people to adopt to something, if you try to give them too much all at once, they're just not going to take it all in. So I would say start small. Have them adopt it bits and pieces at a time, and just to make sure your teams aren't biting off more than they can chew, and that they're really getting the most out of the tool.
Yeah, those are all really good. Finding your champion, right? Starting the top down. I really like that as well too. Scott, what about you? I'm sure in your years, what best practices have you seen?
I think it's well, one, I agree with what Josh said 100% as far as, getting the top down. But I think it's two parts. One, back to when you're selecting a vendor, make sure they have the training in place. Make sure they have the support to help you when you're new, when you don't know what you're doing with it. And also internally, make sure you have it planned out, scheduled, and make sure everybody knows what we're doing, when we're doing it. I went through a CRM change recently, and the first 2 months were use it, play with it a little bit. By month 3, we're using it. So kind of gets people in, lets them go through training. But I think really the support from the vendor. So again, doing your homework, like we talked about before, with who you're going to go with, and know what you're going to get for them as far as training and support. Because yeah, like Josh said, if it's not adopted, it's a waste of time and it causes friction and just doesn't work. So make sure you plan out your internal training and your vendors training. I think that helps out a lot.
I think I went through that same CRM implementation that you did. And, the resources that the vendor provides are huge, right? The online trainings, the in-person trainings that you can do, that support is key. Gurmeet, bring us home for the last couple of minutes. Let's talk about what you've seen and what advice you would give to folks out there who are looking for successful adoption.
Yeah, Mandy, what Scott and Josh had mentioned make a lot of sense, and we've seen that. I've seen that as well. I think one area that I like to talk a little bit about is in the area of the users, right? Prepping your users, because we often that's the forgotten group. Like companies will often purchase some automation software and assume that the users will just they don't have a choice. I've seen where projects fail because of lack of user adoption. I'm talking about user adoptions that may be even casual users of the system. So I think it's important to, what I'd say, prep your users. Tell them why you're doing this. Explain the benefits to them, those users. They really need to understand, okay, this is why the company is doing it. This is the benefit we have. Over communicate as much as possible. Listen to their concerns, but you got to stay on mission. Because if somebody's job is changing, that's okay, but you got to assure them they still have a job, and maybe it's a different role. So no, you have a reason why you're automating, so you have to stay on that. But listen to those concerns, I think, is important. So
I think you're right on. I think it's those end users that sometimes are, unfortunately, not by purpose, but can be forgotten about. So
right.
Yeah, that's a really
project
key note.
failures contribute to that group. So I think it's important to sort of have their voices heard.
Yeah. Well, great. So we've talked a bit about the challenges. So I'm sure there are a lot of other challenges that businesses face, but these are the 3 biggest ones that we've identified. Can I help you get over those big humps with automation? So once you've decided to automate, then it's looking at what are the opportunities, right? So how do you automate? So maybe we could take a few minutes, panel, and kind of just talk about what are the automation opportunities that businesses should consider for their HR workforce or payroll teams, right? So specific to our team here today, what opportunities exist to help them make those departments more efficient? Josh, do you want to kick us off, perhaps?
Yeah. From a TA perspective, I think there are automations and you can find in essentially any step of the recruitment and talent acquisition process, from chatbots that can use AI to talk to prospective candidates that may have questions before wanting to apply. I can think to some of the self-scheduling tools that are in our platforms that just really cut down on the back and forth. I remember times when I first started recruiting. And I needed to interview somebody, I would have to pick up the phone and call them, oftentimes leave a voice message, maybe send a text message, maybe send 3 or 4 emails back and forth. That's just an interview scheduled. Now I can get many interviews scheduled in just the click of a couple buttons. Let's see, I think that there are opportunities around how much AI is within the recruitment platform that we're currently using. And I know in our enterprise solution, there's a tool in there that can I mentioned this earlier, but go out and source our database and automatically reach out to candidates that match that skill set. But also as candidates apply, I can quickly see who the AI thinks is going to be the strongest fit. So you can kind of see where it's every touch point along the way in the recruitment process, from that initial candidate outreach, whether it's the AI doing the outreach, all the way through the process, and somebody scheduling through the interview process. And there are efficiencies to be found in every step of the recruiting process.
Great. Yeah, I think that, like you mentioned, AI has been big there. I feel like recruitment and talent acquisition has been a kind of like a buzzword lately. So yeah, a lot of opportunity for automations and AI there. Thanks for that. Gurmeet.
Well, so I think Josh has covered the HR side. I want to focus a little bit more in this area on workforce. So that's kind of our specialization, really. Where there's particular opportunities. In that area, I think the automating the communication with your workforce as much as possible is important. Everyone has phones now, so real-time employee apps, SMS, all those work great in terms of communication. I think want to get your decision making whenever possible down to the source, as I call it, right? So I think that becomes important. So an example might be that you can assign a shift to an employee and say, this is what you're going to work in, and that's that. Wouldn't it be better if you just let them pick the shift, which is sort of this concept that we have of employee self-scheduling? It just makes a dramatic difference. Creating the transparency, I think, with your workforce as to why something happened is important. So when you are introducing automation, you're essentially reducing the number of steps in the process. And that does take information away from people. So having audit trails that you can share with your workforce, I think, is important.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're trying to make life easier and less stressful for your people. And that actually, I think, ultimately is going to result in a higher retention rate of your workforce.
Right. Communication is key, right? I like that, and transparency. Scott, what about for you specifically? I think I think Greenshades touches on a few of these, but what are your opportunities that you see for folks in this area?
I mean, I think it's kind of piggybacking on what both these gentlemen said. Automating your life makes it so much easier. So you can go from using Josh's product, find your candidate, bring it into Greenshades with integrations, and also use Gurmeet's system to schedule, to where your people are. I mean, everything can be done electronically, done with your phone, and it really simplifies life. I mean, to not having to write out manually schedules, to not having to print all your tax forms and send them all in. All this things can be done electronically and more efficient, and protect your company, protect your people, and just make life easier. That's the whole point of these solutions, is to make business more efficient and honestly make your employees' life a little bit easier. That doesn't have to be paper and pen and old school anymore. These things all work. They work together, which is very important, and they just really will make a business run more efficient.
Yeah. And to bring it back to the earlier conversation too, especially in the areas of all of HR, workforce, and kind of our payroll departments, with so many changing regulations, new rules to follow, things like compliance is super important. So like you said, you're making it easier. People are able to you're able to have that automation to remind you, to notify you, to help you keep on track of, things that maybe your team was doing, all of the regulations they were researching on their own before, right? And all of that too. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there too. Super, super relevant. I think back to kind of why it's important again today, and why it kind of touches on all of these three areas. So we're kind of winding down here. So we've talked about what those opportunities are. let's talk about the rewards, right? So the question here is, how have you seen automation simplify the lives of businesses, right? So simplify, as you guys we've talked throughout over this, the last bit that we've been talking together, many benefits have brought up, right? Efficiency, simplification, getting rid of duplication and all of that. A lot of advantages. How have you guys seen it simplify businesses that you've worked with? Does anybody particularly have like a great success story? Gurmeet, you're shaking your head.
Yeah, I can start. I want to share this story about Vegas for our company. We had Caesars Entertainment, which is called Caesars Entertainment. It was called Harrah's Entertainment about 15 years ago. They came to us with a problem, and the problem for them was they have 8 hotel properties in Vegas, and they had a full-time manager in each, managing the schedules, communicating the schedules, trying to get the employees to show up. And this is a heavily unionized environment, so there's lots of stress, lots of mistakes, lots of union grievances, right? That was the fundamental of the fundamental problem. But they had also a lot of cost, because these 8 managers are doing nothing else but just trying to get people to show up. And the employees were frustrated as well. So this is actually where our self-scheduling concept originated from many years back. After the implementation, now it takes about 5 minutes for the shifts to be filled. And the posting of the shifts are done by an admin person. So you think about the dramatic impact of that automation and the workflow changes. And I can tell you from a manager perspective, those 8 managers can do something else now. Also tied to that is, I was actually in Vegas at some other event, and one of the employees actually came up and said, hey, I think I used that company called Select. She had a hard time pronouncing the name. But my question to her was, okay, how has that impacted you? And she said, it's changed my life, which was interesting. And the next follow-up question was, how? And what she explained is that before the system was implemented, she basically was stressed out. She didn't know what shifts she was going to get during the week, and because she was just playing telephone tag with the manager. Now she says within 5 minutes, she knows what her week looks like. And that I thought was a pretty dramatic experience that both the company and the user has in terms of benefits from. And that's that workflow that we actually rolled out to that one company is pretty well adopted with all the major properties in Vegas. So I think that's an example of where automation had a exponential benefit for all the users.
Yeah, life-changing. And like you said, what's nice about that example, right, is you're seeing those benefits from the organization standpoint, right? All the savings for them and their time and their costs and their focus, but then also realizing that the end user, in this case, the employee, right, it changes her life. That's great.
Right.
Yeah. Josh, how about you? I saw you shaking your head a little bit earlier too. I'm sure you've got some great stories. What's your?
Yeah, a lot of one that I share often, and this may cause a couple of chuckles, but I talked about this a second ago with just in terms of scheduling interviews and how time-consuming that can actually be. So when I started with Employ, I started with the JobVite business unit, and this was 4 years ago. And on my 4th day on the job, I had 9 interviews on my calendar. And I'll say that again, on my 4th day on the job, I had 9 interviews on my calendar. Day 1, I did not get into the system at all. And I had never used JobVite before either at the time. Day 2, I'm learning my job, learning the system, and starting to send out some interview requests here and there. And by day 3, I'm still doing that. And then day 4, it's already filled up. And that the amount of time it took me to get those 9 interviews on my calendar was probably a 20th of what it would have taken, the old way, as I talked about, going back and forth with candidates and trying to find a time that matches up. And And it's the same as we're scheduling for, hiring teams within our organization. It's just as easy. Just send that candidate the link. They can kind of figure out the time that works best for them, and it automates that. So I think that alone is a pretty good success story. And just in terms of, how much time it saves, the efficiency it creates, just by having a tool as simple as, a self-scheduling interviewing tool.
Yeah, I love that firsthand story. And the net is right. You probably look like a rock star on your day 4.
I would have told my teams to never schedule more than like 6 or 7 interviews in one day, because it gets be a long day. But
Nice. Scott, give us an example that you might have that would be interesting for folks here.
It's really where our system really helps payroll and HR people. So I use this company, large company, doing it all in house. They're expanding. So on the payroll side, they're going into Pennsylvania. So payroll person is rightfully terrified because they have all these locals and all these different taxes that can change all the time. So
Pennsylvania is a tough tax state, isn't it, too?
Pennsylvania, Ohio, in general. You throw New York and California, things can get a little crazy. So the nice thing about they're doing it in-house, and where they were, they were fine. It was tedious and a lot of work. So for the HR person, for the payroll person, she now does not have to worry about different tax forms changing, anything going in, locals going in. The system tells her exactly what's going on. So Greenshades updates its form whenever something changes. We update it, so they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to go find the new form. They don't have to deal with all that. On the HR side of things, open enrollment. In about a month or 2, you can barely talk to an HR person in a lot of places because they're doing open enrollment. If it's loaded in the system and it's done correctly, and I'm simplifying it a little bit, but it's pretty much a push of a button to get it out to your staff. It's start open enrollment. It notifies everybody. They go online on their phone, on a tablet, on a computer, whatever they feel like doing. They re-enroll for open enrollment, and they're done. So things that take weeks and months now take honestly hours. And it's not like these people are working less. They're just not working over 40 hours a week. They have it's quality of life. It's going back to the employee that we've talked about. It's making their life easier. And on the employee side, they have access on their phone to their benefits. They just go in and look. So if they don't remember, like me, I never remember. I barely know what I have for insurance. So I go on the phone, look at it, and show my doctor, and here you go. Okay, that's a lot easier than having to dig up the card, remember what it is, call your wife or husband and say, hey, what do we have for insurance? So again, what we've talked about this whole time, it makes the people doing its life more efficient and easier, and then makes the employee's life and easier. And I think it was Gurmeet that talked about retention. It's a big deal. We've all been at those companies in the past that didn't have any of this stuff, and you're like, what's going on here? It's a sense of like, what's the future here? And then when you're with one that, changes things, moves things, back to my CRM upgrade, it was a great upgrade compared to what they had before. So when you see them moving forward, it makes you feel good to be part of the company. So I think that's another benefit of automation.
Yeah, I like that too. And in your example, right, allowing a business to expand into new territory, right? I'm imagining that growth for them into Pennsylvania was a big feat, right? So now they have the tools to help them do it and not drive this poor woman into late, long hours. Great. All right. Well, I think those are all super great stories. Want to kind of close this out a little bit. This is, the crux of our conversation. I will say that if anybody has any specific questions that they wanted to ask, feel free to take a moment, drop it into the question box if you haven't already. We can probably answer maybe a couple of questions. But again, really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much to our panelists, and of course, thanks for everybody for attending. I think that it's a good, relevant conversation just to level set every once in a while of what's going on in the economy, or not even the economy, what's going on with businesses today, right? Why is automation so key? There's a lot of reasons, and it's individual to each business. But the fact of the matter is more and more companies are looking to automate. And then, of course, we know that those aren't with challenges or without challenges. So identify, we took time, we identified the 3 biggest challenges, and hopefully gave everybody on our call today a little bit of fuel to add to their fire to kind of combat those challenges, to overcome it so that they can see those rewards and hopefully be a success story for somebody in the future on a similar webinar. If we can take a second, I do want to maybe address a couple of questions that have come in our last couple of minutes. I will throw this out to the panel. How can we digitalize our workforce, including remote areas? So, we've talked about the changing workforce, right? And it was mentioned a couple times, the use of mobile. We're not all in the office except for Gurmeet. So this is an interesting question that that somebody in our audience asked. Scott, Josh, or Gurmeet, do you have a kind of an answer? It was, again, I'll read it. How can we digitalize our workforce, including remote areas?
I mean, from our end, from Greenshades end, fairly easily. I mean, they have to have internet and or phone connection, and then they can do, everything can be done remotely. You don't, for the payroll person, or if you're any of you listening, you do not have to be in the office to do payroll anymore if you use a system that is in the cloud. So you have that flexibility. It's not, oh my God, I'm going away. It's no, you take the time, and if you have to, and just go on and do it. So, to me, I mean, there's systems like Gurmeet has that they can track where your employees are. If you don't trust your employees and you want to know where they are, or don't let them clock in from the couch at home, that can be done now. All that is automated, and that's why I think these systems have partnered together, because what we don't do well, one of these other guys, Jazz HR with going to find the employees, or Gurmeet scheduling and things like that. Those things can all be done remotely from your phone, your tablet, your computer, whatever you want, and it's life. It's not an issue unless they live in some place that doesn't have internet and phone server or phone servers. I don't know if there's any place that has neither. I could be wrong, but so I don't think it's hard at all. Guys, any opinions on that?
I agree. I think that any of these solutions can provide, or any sort of really SaaS solution can provide that same level. I mean, I think back to when the pandemic first happened, and we were able to transition from being fully in office to fully remote, but just like that. I mean, there was no impact to the business, and I think we had a good infrastructure of things in place around communication. But as far as our customers and the impact to them and using our technologies, no impact there either. They're able to, and Jazz HR specifically was purpose built for small businesses and smaller teams, and so it does give them the ability to kind of look through candidates wherever and remotely or inside the office or out. So I think with a lot of the SaaS solutions, just in the nature of them being in the cloud, it does kind of help with that distributed workforce.
Yeah, thank you. Before we close out, I do have one more question that has come in. Again, we've got about maybe 2 more questions if anything is burning in your guys' mind. But I think, Josh, this might be a more specific question for you, but anybody else, feel free to chime in. How can we recruit and incentivize more diverse candidates?
I could spend a long time talking about this. I'm actually in our Pittsburgh office today. I normally work out of Indianapolis, and Richard's here, and he's our director of DE&I. And I think that takes a larger organizational strategy, and I would start there. That takes it takes buy-in from leadership. But outside of that, just in terms of like tactical recruiting strategy, it's all about kind of finding pools of in the pools of the diverse candidates, and you have to kind of go where they are and reach out to them. So whether that's targeting specific schools or professional organizations, networking groups, I think those are a lot of really good areas to start in. And it's all about kind of targeting those specific candidate pools that you're looking to go after.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep us just for the sake. I'm sure everybody could appreciate just a couple of back. Again, thank you so much to our panelists today, Scott Loudermilk, Josh Jones, and Gurmeet I'm sorry, Gurmeet, tell me your last name again.
Dollywall. I know it's a tough
Thank
one.
you. It actually shouldn't be that tough. Mine is not that easy either. But again, thank you so much for your time today and imparting your knowledge and expertise with our audience. And thank you so much for everybody that joined us today. Hopefully we've left you with a little bit of nugget of information to take away and make it a little bit easier as you hopefully consider more automation solutions to improve your business and your bottom line. So thanks a lot and have a great day, everyone.